Hello Year 10, this is Mrs Hudson here with your lesson for the week about the White Tower. So just some quick revision to start you off before we get into the main body of the lesson. So 5 questions on the left hand side, 5 answers on the right hand side. Can you please match up the question to the answer? If you can pause now for about 2 minutes to see what answers you can get. Okay, so our first question, what was the name of the chapel in the White Tower? That is number 3, St John's Chapel. This shows that this was a place of someone of high status because most people don't have chapels in their houses, and also that it would be used as a residence sometimes because you don't need a chapel for military reasons. B, what is a garderobe? That is 1, a toilet. C, what is the name of the other place that William II lived in when he was in London? And that was 5 Westminster Palace. This shows us that the White Tower might have not been their primary residence due to the fact that he had another palace in London, and this one was much more comfortable to live in. D, true or false, the White Tower has a banqueting hall, a chamber and a chapel showing a high status person lived here. That is true. E, one reason why William built the White Tower, it was as somewhere to live when in London. So last week's work was all about the White Tower and its function as a residence. So that's what we're continuing with this week. Remember, your 3 points are: what was it supposed to do, the White Tower? What was it used for? And how did this change and adapt over time? So this week, we are not going to look at the White Tower as a residence anymore. We are going to consider this week about how the White Tower also acted as a method of defending William I's territory, and also how it helped to exert his political control. So if you can pause the video for a couple of minutes, what I would like you to do is try and define the words control and defend in the box below. So if you pause for 2 minutes. Okay, so my definition would be, for control, it would be the power to influence or direct people's behaviour or the course of events. Defend, however, would be about resisting an attack made on something to protect people from harm or from danger. So there's 2 very different kind of definitions there, and we're going to be looking at that today. Which features show defence, the idea of resisting attack, and which features show control, the power to influence or direct people's behaviour. And size is very much a part of this, okay? If you're kind of concerned about that big building up there and who lives in it, that will help you control your population. So 2 pictures here. Looking at these pictures, how do you think you would feel if you saw the White Tower as A, an invader from another country, and B, an Englishman who didn't like being ruled by William? So again, if you can pause the video for 2 to 3 minutes, just jot down some initial thoughts. Okay, so if you were an invader from another country, this would be quite concerned to find this great castle being built. You're going to think there's someone quite strong within this, that they're going to have lots of weapons, that they're well defended, that it's going to be a challenge to invade this area or in this country. If you're an Englishman who didn't like being ruled by William, seeing this big imposing building, which might even have knocked down your house to make way for this castle, you're going to be thinking that this person's big and strong and powerful. And again, in both cases, you might think it's just not really worth attacking, that you're not really going to stand a chance. So it's going to prevent people or deter them from invading or rebelling. So if you can add your answers to this slide if you haven't already. And moving on to your next task then. So again, it's going for those ideas of why was the castle built? Was it for defence? Was it for control? Was it possibly for both reasons, or maybe even another reason that we haven't talked about already? So what you need to do is go through each kind of box and then put D, C, B or other, and you can write other in, depending on what you believe it is. So if we go through the first one together, the White Tower's unusually large size meant that each floor could be subdivided, with each subdivision being used for both defence and as a living space. Each floor was divided into 3 major rooms, measuring 107 by 199 feet and enclosed by walls up to 15 feet thick. So I would say it's definitely for defence, because you've got the idea that the walls are incredibly thick, which if someone came along with a battering ram or a trebuchet, it's going to make it more difficult to kind of get in. It could be also control as well, because of the unusually large size. Again, if you saw this huge, great stone building, possibly you're not going to start attacking them, and it's going to control you. It's going to make you behave, essentially. If you're an English person, you see this building, you see the power behind it, it is going to make you behave. What you need to do is you need to work through the other options, jotting down what you think they are. You should spend probably about 15 minutes on that task. Okay, so you should know that the White Tower was built with different functions, okay? It was built as a residence, although it was only used occasionally. It was built for William to defend his land from invaders. Obviously, he himself invaded this land and managed to take control and become king. He didn't want someone else coming across the sea and doing the same thing. There was always the potential of that happening, especially by the Danes. He also needed to exert his political control over the country he now ruled, so people followed his rules. And unsurprisingly, these English people didn't really want this French guy kind of coming in and ordering them about particularly. They didn't really all want him to rule the country. Therefore, they perhaps would have rebelled if he hadn't, or they did rebel, but they perhaps wouldn't have rebelled even more if he hadn't had so many castles built across the country, including the White Tower. There was also economic reasons. So as a result of castles being built, towns often grew up around them. This was often because they knew they'd be well protected in this area. They knew there was a lot of kind of custom, there was people there, and therefore towns selling different kind of products grew up. On the following pages then, you need to use the worksheet you've just done to help you with the evidence section, explaining why we could think that the White Tower was built with different functions. There's a little bite-sized bit of revision there for you, a link to click on to help you with this also. So each of these 2 pages should take you about 5 minutes to complete, maybe slightly longer, and then the third page with the conclusion about 5 minutes or so. So we've got about 15 minutes in total. So it could be argued that the White Tower was built to defend the Normans and their territory. The evidence I have for this is, so you need to go back to your worksheet that you were categorising earlier, find your examples, the evidence to show it's built with defence in mind. You then need to explain, well, why did they need to defend their land? Who might possibly come and attack it? Why would people want to invade another country? The second slide then, it could be argued that the White Tower was built to exert control. The evidence I have for this is, so going back to your worksheet again, thinking about the size of it in particular, but there might be other evidence as well, thinking about therefore in your explanation, the Normans needed to control the English population because what was the relationship between William the Conqueror and the English people like? And then your conclusion. Overall, I think that the main function of the White Tower was to defend the Normans and their territory, exert control over the English, a place for William to live. You need to choose an option. Now, we've very clearly over the past 2 weeks looked at all the different functions. They're all valid. The White Tower was built for all of these 3 purposes. Okay, it didn't just have one function, but what was its main function? What was the main reason that William I built it? And you have to make a choice, and you have to explain why that choice was so important at that time, perhaps comparing it to the other reasons and explaining why they weren't as important at that time. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to email myself, Mr. Brown or Miss Bartley, whoever's your teacher, and we will help you through. Thank you.